Thank you all very much for coming today. I really appreciate it. My name is Ashley Oman, and I am the Data Visualization Practice Leader in Kforce's consulting group. Many of you may know Kforce. It's a technology consulting firm, and about 2 years ago, we started our consulting practice. So I lead data visualization. What that means is that I've worked with a lot of you, either as clients or colleagues, and I do a lot of advising on best practices. And today, I'm here to talk to you about data governance. Has anyone here never heard of data governance? Is this your first time? First time? Awesome. All right, I'm glad to hear that. So data governance is a pretty important topic. I'm going to tell you why. But what we also want to talk about is why it's important to your organization and your efforts, and what you as a director or a manager or a strategist or an architect or just an analyst developing things in Tableau can do to help move your enterprise's strategies forward. Or if you don't have any, what you can do to develop them. And I'm going to ask for questions as we go along. I typically do that every slide or so. And if you have any questions, please shout it out. I'm not a super formal presenter, so if you have any thoughts or something that you think would add context for other users or be informative, please raise your hand. And if you don't mind telling me your name, I would appreciate that too. Any questions before I get started? No? All right. So what is data governance? Question of the day, right? Well, Wikipedia says that it is actually a set of processes. And the point of those processes is to ensure that your data assets are managed properly. Now, I think this is not an utterly specific explanation for what data governance is. Wikipedia goes on, and I think this is actually a really good definition. It's an evolving discipline. That's the nice thing about data governance, is that it doesn't depend on the tools that you use. It depends on the knowledge that you have and the ability that you have in your organization to get people together, talk about what's important. If you're looking for a more complicated definition, I got one from Oracle, right? I have some more software jokes scattered throughout here. My husband is the poor guinea pig for a lot of these jokes, and so every time that I have a new one, he's like, "Oh God, more computer humor." Like, computer humor. Yes. So Oracle's definition actually is a really good one, and I got to tell you, it has a lot of big words. But what they're saying is that data governance is a process of specifying who has the rights to what. You also want to specify accountability frameworks. That's a really, really big thing. Accountability, it's a big deal. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And then you also want to encourage people to do the right thing with the data. And that's where we'll talk a lot about Tableau. So you also want to determine how to store your data and how you value it. And a lot of that can be kind of nebulous until you really start working with it. How you value your data? What does that mean? So we're going to talk a lot about what I did in a previous project. Some of you here may even have been part of it. It's a pretty cool project. Actually, I see a few of you here were parts of it from different perspectives. People here from Tableau as the vendor, other colleagues. So I'm going to talk a lot about that because this project was all about data governance. Questions? No? So why is it important? Well, your data is your asset. I do a lot of explaining to my colleagues of what business intelligence is. What is it? It's the process of getting meaning out of your data. And there are a lot of companies now, probably you guys work for them, whose only asset is your data. At Kforce, we don't produce, we don't manufacture anything. Our data is our asset. We collect data. We collect data about people. We collect data about our clients. And what we do with that data is relate those entities together. That is why data is our asset. The meaning, the value that we deliver is in the data and our ability to relate it. So data governance strategies are really important, especially in an organization like mine. And they don't have to answer every question. That's one of the other things about data governance. One of the things that I hope you guys take away from this is that you can have a data governance strategy that that is not enterprise-wide. It can be specific to your department, your area within your business, your product line. It doesn't have to cover everything. Often smaller projects are even more impactful and you can learn more from them. Questions? No? All right. Oh, and I should probably tell you guys now, I don't have any Tableau workbooks or visualizations in here. Just want to let you know. So if you suddenly bolt for the door, I'm not offended. I don't have any flashy graphics either. Sorry about that. So what does data governance look like to you? You may have been part of it in your organization. You may have been part of a data governance committee. Has anyone here been part of a data governance committee? Wow, that's fantastic. Is it fun? Yeah, it's a nice thing about conference calls. You can mute the line. Data governance is also the selection of tools. I'm going to talk a lot about tool selection because it's really important. Actually, one of my clients is a great example of how they put their data governance strategy to work for their tool selection, in addition to my own story. And data stewardship is also very important. Has anyone here heard of data stewardship? Yeah. Yeah, data stewardship is a piece of data governance, but it's the process in which we define what data is important. It usually comes out of data governance, and then we delegate people to protect it. Sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? Protecting. That may have been my phone interfering. Sorry about that. It may sound kind of counterintuitive to have to protect data because it doesn't really exist tangibly, but it really does need to be protected so that in the future you can get even more meaning from it than you get now. Any questions? No? All right. So, as I said, everything is quantified. Question?
I just wanted to see if it would be on the next slide. So, you've spoken about some of the roles within a data governance practice.
Yes.
Who owns it overall in a business?
Who owns it in the business?
IT?
Oh, business. The business owns it. Have you worked with organizations where IT has owned it?
I've worked at an organization where IT tried to own it.
How did that work out?
It didn't.
Oh.
But it was kind of thrown to IT.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's not very nice.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But where I am now, we have the business sponsorship.
Good. Well, I'd love to hear more as we go on about what's worked well for you guys. I think that would be helpful for everyone else because my experience with it has really just been limited to 2 industries. So what industry are you in?
Insurance.
Casualty. Oh, fantastic. All right, good.
Also, the business doesn't own it. They help either.
Really?
What was that?
The business, this is Matthew, the business does not own it in his organization at Hilton.
Nah, I mean, it depends on, I guess, exactly what the definition is of ownership.
Right.
But I would say it's more finance.
I would put finance on the business side rather than IT.
True.
And you're in the finance group, right?
No.
Sales.
Not the core finance group.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Got it. All right, good. Yeah, so I think one of the reasons that a lot of business groups own it is that they're the ones who determine what data actually is important to the business. Who here's in finance in your organization? A few people. I used to be in finance. It was good. In one of my old organizations, finance actually brought in Tableau. They did a really good job with it. So let's get back to this, though. So one of the reasons that it's really important to have a good data governance strategy, and this may be really important to your organization, is that the volume of data that is being generated is increasing almost exponentially. Every 18 months, it increases by 90% or something like that. I see a variety of different numbers for the rate at which it increases. There are 500 million tweets a day. I think that's a really good, tangible indicator of the growth of the volume of data. Who here uses Twitter? Yeah, I do. Some of you use Twitter, you're just not raising your hands. 500 million tweets a day. That's pretty crazy. So that's 1.5 tweets for every person in the United States. It's a lot. I think I produce about 6 a day, and a lot of them are retweets, so not very exciting stuff. But you need a good data governance strategy so that you put that data in a right place and so that you get meaning out of it. And so that you select the best tools to store it quickly and retrieve it quickly and analyze it quickly. Because if your data is just sitting in, in Hadoop or DB2 or somewhere, and no one's getting anything out of it, then it's just a waste of space. So one of the other reasons that we're talking about data governance is that traditionally has been reactive. Has anyone here ever had an application failure? Like maybe you had a reporting application that you were running in, say, .NET, and all of a sudden you got to work on a Monday morning and maybe your offshore team was like, oh, hey, bad news. You're like, oh, really? Okay, could you give me another hour to go drink some more coffee? What's the bad news? Oh, well, the application isn't working. Why? Oh, the hard drive is out of space. Has that ever happened to anyone else here? Yeah. I know some people who've done it over and over because they don't know how to set up the right paging mechanisms. They don't know how to monitor their servers proactively because they're on the IT team and no one's helping them plan. So planning is really important. Anticipation is really important. So let's get started. What are the goals of data governance? Well, we have standards. What are standards? Across your organization, how you refer to your data, what you call different fields, how you use it to communicate. Metadata, that can include your standards. We're going to talk about some ways that you can use Tableau to further your standards that you develop. It's actually really easy. It's one of the nice things about Tableau. You can do a lot with metadata. Processes. Anyone here ever worked with Six Sigma? Yes. Any green belts in the room? Yeah. It's a really good thing. Processes are a good thing. Change management is also a really good thing, but you need to do it right. And those are very big pieces of data governance, especially as you select new tools. Compliance is also a really large factor of your data governance strategy. I know we have one guy here who works in insurance. Does anyone here work for a financial services company? Yes. Does anyone here work for Home Depot? Has anyone here worked for Home Depot? Yes. It's a big problem a couple weeks ago at Home Depot. They were hacked. Same hackers that hacked Target. Financial services companies are really heavily regulated. Retail, not so much. But security, the next point, is a concern for every single company here. It's a concern for me at Kforce because, like I said, our only real asset is our data. Almost all of our data includes someone's social security number or otherwise identifying information. Now, I don't have any of that on my laptop, but I can tell you it was really hard just to be able to hook up a USB drive to my laptop. The ability is there, but it's really well locked down. So if you're a client, this is good news, or one of our consultants, this is good news. We protect our data very, very heavily. I have a lot of financial services clients who do not want to be sued. Security is a really big deal. And then rights. Who needs to see what elements of data? Everyone does not need to see everything. And thinking otherwise is a waste of time. Give people what's relevant to them. If they need something else, they'll probably ask. Then one of the biggest points I can make here is that data governance is not about tactics. ETL, very important. That's an element of data governance, but it's a product of your determination of what data is valuable, how you want to transform it, what meaning you want to get out of it. Data cleansing, also very important. Master data management, also very important. All parts of data governance. All very tactical. Questions?
Metrics.
Yes, metrics. I did. You're right. So metrics. What do metrics do? They measure a lot of things. They measure the performance of your enterprise. One of the reasons that you have a data governance strategy is to determine what you want to measure. You can also use metrics to measure the cleanliness of your data and the quality of your data. That's very important, something you also can do with Tableau. So the reason that we want to determine what's important as part of a good data governance strategy is so that that can work and influence every stage of our BI lifecycle and product suite. And the people who work with them. And that's really the most important part, is the people. That's where I'm going to go next. Questions? Oh, guys, I have a one-pager that you can take with you, too. So if you're like me and your handwriting is pretty bad, or you don't want to take notes, no worries. And this will be online after. All right, next. So I'm going to tell you my Tableau story. It's a story I've told before, and I'm really, really thrilled that some of you who are part of it are here. And it all starts with data governance. It actually really starts with SAP. Anyone know any good SAP jokes? Send another payment. Do you have one, Dave? No?
SAP in general.
So the joke is, do you even need a joke? SAP is the joke. And it's actually a really awesome tool. One of the challenges that I had in an old job was that we had 4 instances of SAP. So my job was to report on employee performance, and it was a really, really important set of analytics. And we were doing it in Excel, and when I got to this role, we were doing it every quarter. In whose organization would it be okay to report on performance every quarter? Raise your hand if that's okay. It's really not. And it wasn't. It was not okay. But we were doing it every quarter because we didn't have a way to get the data faster. That was a challenge. And this was several years ago. So I worked in an organization that had acquired several smaller organizations. And the performance data was really important because it determined who got the hammer and who got the gold star. So what our management teams needed to do was to figure out who was doing really well and who wasn't doing really well. And so we had to download this data from SAP. And when I say that it was painful, I mean it was painful, it was sleep-inducing, it was headache-inducing, it was nausea-inducing. It was a terrible experience. And it's not the fault of SAP. It was just the way it was designed. It took a month to download all the data that we needed and then validate that we had it all. In whose organization would that be acceptable? No one. No one. So what we tried to do was build a new application. And our IT group, bless their hearts, as we say in the South, got the data from SAP into a data warehouse. They went through 3 or 4 data warehouses before that, and they often lost it. They often applied business logic that was not accurate. I had one guy call me. He said, you know what? I did some work on a weekend, and I don't see it in your report online. So I started reading code. I read a lot of code, and I discovered that a programmer somewhere along the way had decided that he wasn't going to load data from Saturday and Sunday. That was a big problem because our customers were having our people working there on Saturday and Sunday sometimes. And the people doing that work got paid overtime, and I needed to know about it because that's a big cost. Overtime? It's important. So our IT group said, you know what, if you give us some really good requirements, we'll build it for you. I said, great. Let me write the best requirements ever in the history of business analytics. They were nice wireframes, flowcharts. All my styles in Microsoft Word were all lined up. Everything was indented properly. And then I went on maternity leave, and I came back. I was like, hey, guys, how's it going? I'm nicer than I was before I had the baby. And they said, oh, it's not going that well. I said, why? Well, we don't think we can complete the project. I said, why not? Why can't you complete the project? Like, do I need to bring you pizza? Do you need cookies? What's going on? More coffee? I'll do it. Just finish. I need this. Don't make me go back to SAP. And they said, you know, we really actually can't do it at all. I said, why not? We've paid you $300,000. What do I have to show for this? Don't tell me no. I'm a nice person, I swear. They really couldn't do it. It wasn't personal. They couldn't because they had bad design, because there was no ownership. Of course, this did not go over very well in my part of the organization because the Affordable Care Act had tacked on a 2.75% tax to everything that we sold. So the little bit of profit that we had to fund projects like this decreased by a little more than 2.75%. It's a lot more than 2.75%. So we were really squeezed for money. $300,000 was a chunk of change. That was 3 or 4 business analysts right there. So we spent some time, not too much time, we just took a step back. What happened? There was no ownership. There was no accountability. We didn't have any data governance. That was the problem. None. None. It was sad. It really was. And it hurt. And it took a lot of time, and it made a lot of people really mad. But we were actually in a good position. We had a senior executive who didn't like this situation. Instead of pointing fingers, he said, you know what, we're not going to do this again. We're going to do it differently. And you're going to take charge. And so my boss's boss got the marching orders. He said, you know what? We're going to give you another $300,000. And you're going to do it yourselves because we think you can. And it turned out, we looked at our team and we determined that we had the skill sets that we needed to do it ourselves. We had 10 business analysts, give or take. We had a couple who had been DBAs before. We had a couple who were really good at SQL. And we had a couple others who were pretty good at Excel and thought they could learn a new tool. And none of us wanted to go back to downloading data from SAP. So we had a shared mission, and that's really important too. Everyone needs to agree that it's important to your organization. And that's one of the key tenets of change management. I mean, this is all about change management. Our senior executive said, we have to change. Then he said, here's the money. That helped a lot, obviously. Right? And then he told us, I believe you can do it. Here's the vision. You're going to communicate it to your whole team, and I'm going to get the business on board, and we're going to do it together. And so we did. But we had to have responsibility. So one of the first things that we did was we developed a data governance committee, an oversight committee. We had people from all the areas of the business. We had finance, really important. We had operations. We had business intelligence. We had some people from IT who came in and out because we still needed them. They were put in a bad position. It wasn't really their fault. It wasn't. It wasn't a blame game at all. It was a shared sense of accountability and responsibility. How can we fix this going forward? So then we started looking at tools. We needed new tools. We had SAP. We had a lot of SQL servers. I really like SQL Server. We had some DBAs. We had some people on our team who knew how to write SQL. So we started building a new data warehouse because we had a huge data quality problem. Remember what I mentioned? Whoa, skipped way ahead. Sorry about that. We had a problem where data wasn't being added for work done on the weekends. There were a lot of other problems like that. So we determined that in order to maximize our time, we would build a new data warehouse. So we found the shortest route from SAP to our system. And we built our own. And we'd been playing with Tableau desktop for a couple months, maybe 3 months by that time. And we had an idea of how the data needed to look. And we also had a project that had failed to inform us of what not to do. That was very useful. We knew how to structure our data. We had managers who had a lot of courage. And they went to people and they said, we really need you to be on board. That's a really big part of data governance. It's a big part of change management, getting other people to agree that your mission and your vision are important. And you have to tell them everything you can. You have to tell them what's in it for them. You have to make sure that they know what the next steps are and how they're going to be responsible. It's really important. So the tools that you pick should be extensions of your strategy. Everyone here is using Tableau, right? Is anyone here not using it? No? No one? That's awesome. Really good. I have a client who's in the healthcare industry, and they have a really good data governance strategy. They recently selected a new electronic health records system. They did not select Epic. They selected something else. They go to conferences, they go to symposia, and people say, why didn't you select Epic? And they say, you know, that tool is not going to meet our needs in the future. It may meet yours, and that's awesome, but it just wasn't right for our organization. It didn't meet our needs. It didn't integrate with our other applications. That's really important. Integration with other applications, your data governance strategy should cover that. And theirs did. And they selected a tool that works great for them. It's been going really well. So we selected SQL Server. We built our own data warehouse. It worked very well. Then we hooked it up to Tableau. And for us, Tableau is really good. We built a nice server environment. I'm pretty biased when I say that. I had the privilege of building it and then running it. And there were several facets of it that were very important to our data governance strategy. First, we wanted to make sure that we could build a user experience that was consistent and coherent for everyone in our organization who would be using it. We ended up with 500 users, from executive VPs, vice presidents, directors, managers, and then people in the field. We wanted to make sure that everyone had access to the right level of granularity that they needed to make their decisions. That was part of our data governance strategy. Question?
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Oh, okay. Thanks.
It was just about, with your data quality issues were in the data warehouse and not in SAP.
That is correct. Yeah, so here's the question, is where were our data quality issues? They were not in SAP. We had other issues with SAP. Our SAP infrastructure actually ran really well. What didn't run well was everything downstream. It just didn't run well. The data quality issues were within the extraction and the transfer. Not the transformation per se, but the transfer of data from SAP into different data warehouses, different intermediate systems. So that was our problem with data quality. We fixed it. And I'll tell you how we fixed it. So we wanted to make sure that everyone had the right level of visibility into their region so that they could make decisions really quickly. We also wanted to make sure that the latency of our data was very low. I mentioned that before we've been reporting quarterly. Much of our data refreshed every day. The highest degree of latency we had was monthly. We were dependent on finance for some data. They gave it to us every month. They built their own data warehouse, which was very nice. So we just used SSIS packages to transfer it from one system to the other. We also wanted to make sure that we were sharing data with other users because we were in a very large organization. Part of our data governance strategy was the determination of who needed what elements of data and where they would be sourced. A lot of them ended up sourced in our system. 45 metrics is a lot. We had a lot of data. We shared it with finance. They sent us their financial data every month. We sent back the financial data with some performance data as well. Question?
When you say one set of metrics for everyone, can you elaborate a little bit on that? I'm not
Absolutely.
sure I quite follow that. Because I think about that in the context of the insurance industry, right?
Sure.
I've got claims folks, I've got policy admin,
Mhm.
premium folks, I've got operations, and they're all looking at different metrics to measure how they're operating within that business
Sure.
across the enterprise.
But I'll bet there's some metrics that overlap, right?
There's probably some common metrics that everyone would be interested in,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't, and that you could say they, sort of contribute to, but,
Mm-hmm.
but there would be 45.
So we had 4 groups. We had operational metrics, customer metrics, HR metrics, and then financial metrics. And we had 45 metrics within those. We had spec'd out 60, but we weren't able to get data for all of them. So within those 45 metrics, 4 groups, as I said, and we had 4 distinct groups of our business. They were all doing the same job, but for different products. And they all had started off in different organizations. So those 45 metrics applied to almost all of them. Let's say that there were 38 that applied to everyone, and then there were 7 that applied to some but not others. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, one of the things that we also needed to solve was the issue of people selectively changing metrics. This happens. Does that happen in anyone else's organization? Yeah. People want to look good. I mean, I do. Everyone wants to look good, right? If you're reporting to your boss and you think there's something little you can change in your data that will make you look better, you might do it. It happens every day. And we wanted to prevent that from happening because we wanted to make sure that our EVP, who had funded this whole shindig, was getting the same numbers, the same logic from everyone. And we actually used the metadata layer of Tableau, well, not an official metadata layer. We built a metadata layer to make sure that everyone in the field knew exactly what they were looking at and how they were being measured. And I believe I have that on a slide. Oh, right, here. Yeah, so one of the ways that people came to trust our tool, because like I said, the previous project had failed. And we had a lot of business leaders who had spent months of their own time developing their own dashboards in Excel, which is sad. Who wants to do that? A month of your time just to build it and then to update it? It's a nightmare. We all have hobbies, families, other things to do than work in Excel. It's like brain jail. No thanks. So what we wanted to do is make sure that everyone understood exactly what the definitions of our metrics were. We actually built dimensions of our metrics. And in the dimension, we would say, this applies to these 3 business lines. And here's the definition. Here's the definition in English. Here's how we calculate profit. Here's what it means to you. Then we would have the mathematical calculation because some people, I guess, communicate better in math than they do in words. It happens. I have a little cousin like that. God bless him. And we want to make sure that people knew. Transparency is a really big deal. And if you build your data warehouse properly, you can add a lot of transparency to your metrics, and Tableau helps with that.
Where did you store or keep that metadata?
Oh, yeah.
Descriptions?
SQL Server. So a lot of people have Snowflake schemas. Ours was an enhanced star schema.
So you're saying like the definition, are you storing that on a spreadsheet, all the calculations?
In a table in SQL Server.
In a table in SQL Server.
Yeah, because we had a lot of primary keys. My boss loved primary keys and foreign keys. I would end up writing 10 join conditions just to get a basic table. So I told him we can't do that again because life is short. I don't have time to write that many join conditions. We're going to make it a little easier. But we did have primary keys for all of our metrics. And one of the reasons we did that is that we wanted to make sure that the name of every metric was exactly the same in every place that we were reporting it. We also used that in Tableau Server for our URL actions. So if someone wanted to go from a high level of granularity to a totally different dashboard, we used the metric name that we sourced from the metric dimension to navigate them. It worked really well. Does anyone here use URL actions and parameters put together? Yeah, really good combination. You can do a lot with it. It's a very, very slick user experience. Your users may have no idea that they're going between different web pages, but it's something we had to do because we had a high volume of data. It was a good user experience. But back to this. Like I said, we wanted to make sure that everyone had the information that they needed. We didn't want to give them too much information, not because we were selfish or we didn't trust them, but because we wanted to make sure that when they were using our application, they only got what was most relevant to them at the time. And their business leaders, as part of our data governance strategy, had defined that for them. Some of them didn't agree with it. We had some heated phone calls. That's a reality. Sometimes listening can be harder than it seems like it would be. We had a lot of people who yelled at us. A lot of people who thought we were Big Brother. I don't think I look like Big Brother. But on a conference call, you don't know, right? You can't see the other person. Questions? Yes.
45 metrics, did you deploy multiple workbooks, multiple data sources, or was it a self-service place where analysts could create their own workbooks and then publish? Just curious.
It was not self-service.
Okay.
We had a good environment. So we had a preliminary heat map, more or less, where we rolled up our business into 7 business lines or units, and then we had the four metric groups, and we had a hierarchy, so they were all expandable. And then the user, if it were a higher level manager, would select their geography. So they would expand the business lines, click on their geography and a metric group. It would take them to another workbook, had a dashboard, and then they could select, bless you, a specific metric and or a time frame, and they could go farther into the geography, and then that would take them to a 4 blocker for that metric. And from the 4 blocker, they would see trends over time, year-over-year performance, and then the distribution of the performance among their team. And there they could go to the lowest level of granularity. What we did not do was we did not expose the detailed data through Tableau at any phase of the process. And I think that's actually a really big piece of metadata. I'm going to get to that. So trust is a big deal. I've talked a lot about transparency. It's very important. And if people don't trust it, they will not use it. If they don't use it, either because they don't trust it or it's not relevant to them, then all you have is a pretty graph. So what we did, and I've spoken about it a little bit, is we used Tableau. We used the tooltips to expose our metric definitions. But like I said, not everyone was happy about this. We did a really good job of presenting it to them, but you have to be really consistent with your presentations. We didn't ever have to be forceful. You didn't have to shove anything down anyone's throat. We had a great value proposition. If you use this, you will have the information that you need to improve your team's performance. It was very clear. But the metric thresholds that we had were also really important, because if you see a heat map and you see a lot of red, you want to know, why is it red? What makes it red? What do I have to do to get it to be yellow or green, ideally, or blue? So we had tips. Here's what you can do to improve this metric. We wanted to make sure that we weren't just throwing numbers at people. We wanted them to be able to relate it to their lives. When you go to a customer, get a customer satisfaction survey filled out. Talk to your customer. Make sure that if they got a bill from you, that they know how to pay it. All these things will affect your metrics. They'll affect your job. No one really, I hope, wants to lose their job. We had a lot of people whose performance metrics were bad. They weren't bad because they were doing a bad job. A lot of them were doing a good job. Their metrics were bad because they didn't understand how they were being measured. Part of our data governance strategy was to make sure they knew that, and we used this tool to do it. Questions? No? All right, I've talked a lot about validity and transparency. I think I've covered everything on this slide, but yes, transparency, transparency, transparency. And then access. We talked a little bit about access and the democratization of data. I told you that we ended up sharing data back with our finance organization. We ended up with an EDW that was kind of the repository of record. And when other people realized they didn't have to go to SAP to get the data, that we had all the transactional data, all the master data joined up in a nice analytics layer, they came to us. It made us feel good. That was a really good measure of success for us because it's hard to measure. It's actually hard to measure the success of your data governance strategies. I've talked a little bit already about naming conventions, but I want to go back to it because I think it's a big deal with Tableau. When we were evaluating different BI tools, we looked at ClickView. And ClickView said, oh, you're looking at Tableau, they don't have any metadata management. We do. But it's actually not true. Tableau does have really good metadata management. And there are many different ways you can do it. If we were just importing the SAP data as it was into our data warehouse, we would have had to change a lot of field names. Our organization is European. They don't track time the same way that we do. Instead of having a nice date time field, you had a string of numbers. What does this mean? We got to transform it into a date time field. We had a lot of product model numbers. It's just numbers. You have to turn it into something meaningful. That's the point of metadata, is to turn just raw data into something meaningful, that when people look at it, they'll know, oh, this is profit. Oh, this is sales. Oh, this is the East region. Oh, this is Jim's region. It's really important. And one of our initiatives as part of our data governance strategy was to make sure that everyone who was developing data and deploying it on our Tableau server was using the same naming conventions.
How much of that did you drive from SAP? Like, this is what it says in SAP, so this is what people are used to, so this is what we'll call it in the data warehouse?
So, it was a combination. Actually, we had learned a lot over time about how the rules in SAP were not congruent with the way that the business was using the data. I probably spent way more of my life on phone calls with our developers figuring this out than I would have liked to have spent. Because SAP will do things like, instead of having a negative number for sales, it will have two fields. One is the indicator of whether or not the number is negative. And it may not be binary. It may have values like Z. Seems like every field I've ever seen in SAP starts with Z. And they have really weird German names. So we gave them friendly names. Like, we just called one field gerbil because we did not know what it said in German. ZGHBRL. What does that mean to me? And how can I apply some meaning to that so that no one else ever has to figure out what that means? So a lot of it's about efficiency. So we built a data dictionary in Excel, and it was big. It was really painful. I was really glad that was not my project. But a data dictionary is good, and you can also use a data dictionary in Tableau. If it's in Excel, great. Load it up into your dashboard. Join it to your metrics. You can do that. It's a good idea. It's a really good idea.
What was that again?
Data dictionary?
Join that.
Oh, sure. Yes, so in our case, I said we had a primary key. So we had a unique identifier for every one of our metrics. So if we had other information on the data lineage that we wanted to include, we would just include that same primary key to maybe our highest level dashboard and build another dashboard or accompanying worksheet, or even use a tooltip and join our data on the primary key so that people could see how it was being used in other parts of the organization or where the data had come from. You can use Tableau to give your users a lot of context about their data and your data. So we also used shared data sources. That was another way that we made sure that people were always reporting on the same data that use the same logic. Very important. Shared data sources are good. Other things that you can do are build views. People can just select everything from a view. A view is a good tool. The reason that I like a view is that it's easy to change. You can add fields to a view really easily, and you don't have to change any underlying tables in your database. Downside is it's slow. Questions about this? I have a feeling I'm running out of time, so let me go a little faster. Data quality is very important. Data quality is something that changes over time, and you can measure it. We use Tableau to measure it. It was really a big deal, very big deal. But I want to go back to this quote, design is empathy. If anyone remembers last year, John Maeda said this in his keynote. Brian Chesky is the founder of Airbnb, which has been really successful. Design is empathy. When you are designing your dashboard or your data governance strategy, keep your end user in mind. One day you will be the end user of someone else's dashboard or data governance strategy. It's really important. And then rights. So this is one of the last things. Not all information is useful information. Everyone does not need everything, and you don't want a lawsuit. I think that's a really simple value proposition. It should be a huge part of your data governance strategy. Even if the outcome of your exploration of data rights within your strategy is, it's okay if everyone has access to everything. More than likely, it's not. More than likely, you have very strict processes already in your organization to give people access. Questions about that? No? Some of you are nodding and smiling. And compliance. I spoke about lawsuits. So after Target was hacked, my mother-in-law started calling me. Does anyone here have a mother-in-law who doesn't know a lot about technology? Has anyone here heard jokes about my mother-in-law before? Yeah, she's a sweet lady. Fortunately, I have two mother-in-laws, so if one of them gets on my nerves, I can just pal around with the other one, go to a flower show or something like that. But anyhow, mother-in-law number one. Mother-in-law number one is moderately paranoid. Like I said, very sweet lady, does not understand technology. She came to my house and she's like, oh, where's your VCR? I was like, VCR? That is not a VCR. That's your VCR. No, that's a Blu-ray player. What's that? I was like, that's the thing you've been using for 3 years to show my son movies. That's a Blu-ray player, which she did not buy at Target. But she kept calling me, oh my God, all my credit cards are going to be hacked. These Russians are going to buy things. What am I going to do? I was like, have a drink. Oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But I thought about it a little more, like I shop at Target all the time. I'd be really unhappy if a hacker got my credit card number because I want to use that. I don't want them to use it. So I got a Target credit card because I figured Target will never lose another customer's data again because they just got fined. I mean, it's a lot of money. Lawsuits, a lot of money. A lot of money. Home Depot, not pretty. Not pretty at all. And if you're in financial services, you have entire segments of your IT that work to keep the SEC happy. Where you store data, for how long, how you aggregate it, super important to the SEC. Spend a lot of time and money on it, I guarantee it. It's not a lot of fun, I don't think, but maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's fun to other people. Tableau Server has some great capabilities for security. I said earlier, I've never exposed detailed data. You know, there's that option when you deploy to server. You can allow different users to see the underlying data. Does anyone here not do that? Am I the only one who doesn't do it? I'm glad I'm not the only one. I don't think it's a good idea. And theoretically, I didn't realize that. People started calling me. They're like, oh, I was looking at the underlying data, and I think you might be wrong. And I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to give you that access anymore because I'm pretty sure it's right. So, and it was right. But like I said, people like to have different versions of the truth. So save yourself time and a lot of money. Don't expose the underlying data if you think there might be any identifying information or sensitive information in it. HR also really big on sensitive information. And if you're a European company, what they qualify as sensitive is almost everything. Questions about that? Row-level security, also very important. So make it a real priority within your data governance strategy to figure out how you're going to secure your data and what you will allow people to see. Because if you get sued, it's going to take up a whole ton of time and money, and no one wants that. You could end up like my mother-in-law, like terrified. So what was the outcome for us? We actually developed an outstanding product. And at the time, we didn't really know that it was going to be phenomenal, because when you're stuck in the weeds of analyzing your data and validating it and building user experiences and talking to people and getting yelled at on the phone by engineers who are nearing retirement and don't want to be told that their numbers are bad, you're not necessarily focused on your data governance strategy. That's why you have data governance committees, to remind people all the time that what they're doing is really, really important to the growth and the outcome of the organization and the analytics. How did we measure it? Well, here's what I tell people all the time. You can't really measure it. I mean, there's not one metric that you can say will tell you whether or not your data governance strategy has been good. But if you have a new analytics product, ask people before you implement it how much time they're spending every week analyzing their data. I asked. The number I got back, on average, 4 hours a week. These were senior managers. 4 hours a week is a lot of time. I asked them about 6 months later, oh, how much time are you spending on this every week? I got an average of 1 hour. You know, they were my friends. They were my work friends. I knew a lot of them. Talk about our kids. I knew they had lives and better things to do than analyze data in Excel that we delivered to them in Tableau. So we saved 3 hours a week for about 150 people. I think that's a pretty big deal. And I think that's a really good indicator that we had the right data governance strategy. There's another way you can measure it, whether or not you get sued. If you don't get sued, you probably have good information security and a good data governance strategy. You can't afford not to do it. The opportunity cost is too high. So definitely do it. Develop your strategy. Let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to talk about it. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, I think LinkedIn. Question?
Yeah. Your bullet there that says implementing data governance with Tableau Server is
Mm-hmm.
very easy.
Yes.
Can you speak to why do you say it's so easy?
Why do I say it's so
We're
easy?
struggling.
Okay. Well, we can definitely talk about that. So there are things that you can do that make it really easy. If you have a data warehouse that's built properly, it can be very easy to implement in a Tableau server. So row-level security at the most granular level can take a lot of time, but managing your groups and your projects and your permissions properly shouldn't be hard. And I'll expand on this. It's easy compared with other tools.
I mean, the thing that we struggle with is organizing it.
Oh.
Everything is all in one big file. So it's
Oh.
1,000 different data sources defined.
Oh,
and
yes.
several thousand projects defined.
Whoa.
Everyone just goes to one folder and they're all in there. You know, how do they find what they
That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
So organize it into projects. Do you have someone who manages your Tableau server environment?
We do.
Is that person in IT?
They are.
You probably need someone in the business to do that. Someone who interacts with those authors and the end users on a daily basis.
Right, yeah, that's what we're trying to organize now. But I was just wondering if you had any general guidelines or principles.
So there's no magic bullet. I would say what I have seen in groups that have worked really well is that there's constant and consistent communication. I mean, data governance is all about communication. Your implementation is all about communication. But people forget you have to talk about the tool. And you have to tell people. You have to train them really well. I have a lot of clients who say, oh, our implementation isn't going that well. And I say, well, have you trained your users? And they say, no. It's a big thing. And the training extends. Your server administrator needs to be well trained. If the person is in IT, they need to know who the business stakeholders are. You have to have people who are accountable and responsible for it, because if you build an end-user experience that either for authors who are publishing or for business consumers is confusing, then people won't use it. And this is really important with Tableau. I have an executive director, super awesome guy, and he said to me, you know, I saw Tableau before you came here, and I hated it. I said, why? Tell me more about that. Fortunately, it was a conference call. He didn't see the shock on my face. He said, well, the person who showed it to me last time didn't tell me why it was important to me. So what am I supposed to do with this? It's a new tool. All I know is it's going to cost me money. So you have to tell people why they need to use it and why they need to be careful with it. And, you know, if you have a big mess, then pause everything, get it organized. That's an acceptable thing to do. Start over. If it's really disorganized, make a list. Talk to your business users. What are your priorities? What is important here? And just go back to the beginning. Because once it gets out of control, it's really hard to get back under control like anything else. I'm sorry you have that. Doesn't sound fun. But question?
You talked about training.
Yes.
Did you find you also had to reinforce?
Absolutely. We absolutely reinforced it. So I've trained over 300 users now in Tableau Desktop and how to use it. We did a significant amount of end user training. We trained over 500 users. And it took a long time. It was painful. It wasn't painful from the perspective that the content was difficult. We had so many people. And the hard part, yes. So the hard part was getting people on board. I mean, there were people who yelled at us. They would say, I don't agree with your metrics. We'd say, we understand that you may not agree. That's a different conversation. Let's have that online. Let me tell you how we're going to use it and how it applies to you. And yeah, we reinforced it constantly. We had quarterly trainings. We would have open-ended conference calls, and we would say to people, if you're new, you must come. If you want a refresher, join us. And it worked really well. It was good. We had a lot of stakeholders and a lot of allies embedded within our business. We made a lot of friends. That's a really important thing to do. Lots of pizza and cookies. There's no harm in bribes, seriously. do what it takes. Questions? Yes?
From a data governance standpoint, did you guys have a lot of overlapping data where, it was in one solution and another one based on region, and trying to separate those out where it wasn't always a black or white thing to answer within the data field?
No. Our data had been structured in a very linear fashion in SAP. We didn't have a lot of overlaps. And almost everyone else who was reporting on this data was doing it either in a closed Cognos environment or in an offline tool. So there weren't really any other instances of these metrics online where everyone could see them, where we thought there might be the wrong business logic applied. It's mostly just Excel. It's a good question. Question? 5 minutes? Other questions? Yes?
Did you have the political support to implement the accountability framework that I also suggested? And how would you recommend one proceed if they don't have that?
There's not a lot you can do without it. Yeah, so this question was, did we have the political support we needed to implement the framework? We did. I will say my boss took a lot of bullets. He spent a lot of time on the phone with our IT stakeholders, because when they found out we had bought Tableau Server and we had built our own data warehouse, they said, well, you can't do that. That's our job. And he very, very nicely said, well, you didn't do your job. So we had to do it because we can't keep losing money giving it to you so that you can do nothing with it. And I would say we even got lucky. We had a senior vice president who just had a lot of courage, and he made it happen. We were very lucky. These guys are laughing. It took them a lot longer to get their server license than it took us.
Thanks. That's one way to say
I don't mean it like that. I would say we were lucky. I think you guys would probably agree. We were there at the right place in the right time. We managed to get something into a funding cycle, and I know it takes a lot of time for other people, like a year. Painful. Got to make a lot of business cases. Question?
Yeah, I work in a healthcare organization, and our biggest concern is HIPAA.
Yes,
And so we have
HIPAA.
an existing data warehouse, and so trying to move towards a Tableau server. Do you have any suggestions on resources for talking about rights and compliance, and how other organizations have done it, success stories, strategies, things like that?
Sure. Yeah, I do. I'm happy to talk to you about that. I have a lot of experience with that, and I have an awesome client in Southern California who I bet has some good PowerPoints on it. I'm happy to ask her. I'll give you my card. I have tons of cards, like hundreds of them, so please take some. I thought the capacity of this room was 300. Yeah, thanks for coming, Preston.
Sorry.
I'm not calling you out, really. Thank you for coming. Other questions? I think people have to go. Other presentations to see. Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it. I hope this has been helpful for you. I'm sorry it wasn't flashier. Oh, 2 more slides. These will be online. I have a blog. I have Twitter. Everyone does. Survey. Do the survey. It's in the app. And follow my blog.